Since Overwatch went free to play in 2022 with the release of Overwatch 2, we've gotten a very high uptick in new players each season. But with that, we've also gotten a lot of cheaters, smurfs, and overall just toxic players joining into the community. But that's for another video. With getting new players onto the game, obviously some of them try to get into the competitive scene that a lot of us are in. You start going through the character roster, figuring out what characters you want to get better with and try to main, whether that's a DPS healer or if you really don't love yourself, a tank. Anyways, you go in the rank, you start playing these games, you're getting wins, you're getting losses, but you also start to see and hear people using certain terms that if you've never played a MOBA in general, you probably haven't heard before. Things like support diff, or someone complaining that the tank wasn't taking space, or even hearing someone talk about a main or a flex support or DPS. And in this video, I'm going to fully explain each one of these terms so you can stop using them wrong. The first one we're going to go over is DPS diff, tank diff, support diff, whatever, getting diffed. Now this one is the most commonly used in every level of competitive, but it's probably also the most incorrectly used out of all of them by far. That if I do better than the guy on the other team and we're on the same role, I diffed him at that role. And on the very base level, yes, that is correct. That is getting diffed. However, that's only taking into consideration the numbers part of Overwatch, which anybody that's played competitive for a good amount of time will let you know those numbers don't tell you everything. My best way of saying this is Overwatch is not like a card game where just because you have a higher number you win. You have to actually pay attention to the flow of the game because a lot of times you'll find out that not always the better team wins. So as I said before, you already know the basic version of DPS diff, support diff, tank diff, so we're not going to go over an example for that. You already know that one. So with the basic diff out the way, let's go over the one that's not so cut and dry. In this example, you're playing push, you're on DPS, and you're going crazy. You got 20 elims, you've only died like 5 times, and you have 10,000 damage done. But for some reason, you guys can't seem to push the robot that far, and you go to look at the scoreboard, and you see your DPS have both died around 12 times. Neither of them have even broken 8k heals, and neither of them have over 5 assists. Now hold on. Before you jump the gun and say that's obviously a support diff, let's look at it from the support's point of view. They just respawn, they're on their way to the bot, they come help you guys, heal you and everything, all that good stuff. As soon as they turn the corner, Widow sends them straight back to the spawn room. And not to mention, there's a Sombra always in the back line that keeps hacking them and sending them back to the spawn room as well. And you're so tunnel vision focused on farming as much damage as you can off of the Orisa on the other team that you haven't noticed that every time that your supports walk around a corner, they've gotten deleted, and it's not their fault because they get no help. The tank hasn't gone to a shield character like Sigma to wall off the Widow, or even gone like Diva or Winston to just push them off of the spot that they keep sniping from. And you as one of the DPS hasn't even thought to maybe switch it up so you can go after the Widow and still be able to get picks off the supports and stop farming damage off of the tank. I know it's a big target, it's easy to hit them. That's not what we're here for. Just actually paying attention to the game and the flow of the game instead of just looking at numbers once you're already back in the spawn room and just blaming someone with the lowest numbers can help really save team morale and actually switch the game into your favor. Now we're going to move on to the next one, which is taking space. Now this one isn't as used as DPS diff, tank diff, or support diff, but it is getting used more and people still don't fully understand what that means either. Now let me just say this very clearly. Taking space does not mean going on Reinhardt, Malga, or whatever you want and just running into the enemy team and expecting them to be so scared of you by yourself that they all just fall back. That's not how that works. All that's going to do is put you in contentions for the fastest time to get back into the spawn room. Another thing that I want to make very clear, tanks are not the only characters that can take space. Something I mentioned in the video I made about Venture, which if you haven't seen that, go ahead and watch that after this one, link will be right there. There's a group of DPS that I don't think anybody else calls them this, at least from my knowledge, unless I've been living under a rock. Characters that might be hit scan like Soldier or Widowmaker, or even some of the projectile characters like Pharah, Junkrat, hell, even Torbjorn can help take space. Now obviously with that being said, the tank can and still should try to take space or at least occupy the space that's made by the DPS. They just don't always have to be the end all be all for who has to take space. Sometimes you just need a Widowmaker who's ready to snipe anybody that thinks they can walk down the middle corridor and send them back to the spawn room. Or if you're a projectile projectile character like Pharah or Junkrat, you can make them think twice about going into any open area or even the high ground because of the war crimes that you're willing to commit. And I'd say another way to play tank is kind of on a counter on the DPS. Now this one is definitely more of my opinion. I could be completely wrong, and somebody who's higher ranked than me and in the pro scene can let me know why I'm wrong. Or maybe I've been living under a rock and all of this is actually common sense. Like what I mentioned before when we were talking about getting diffed, you can go somebody like Sigma and pretty much shield off their sniping spot so that they have to reposition to probably a less favorable spot that might be a lot easier for your DPS to get to, or even for you to get to so that you can take them out. The whole point of this one is just to say tanks aren't the only ones that can take space. DPS can, tanks can, hell, even some of the supports can, because I guarantee you if a tank gets hit with a Zen Discord orb, they aren't going to be pushing. They're going behind that wall waiting a few seconds for it to go away. That gives you a chance to push forward and put pressure on them. Or if you're playing Ana, you just keep throwing anti-nades at their tank or their DPS so they can't even get anywhere without having half health pretty much. Now we're on to the final one, which is main/flex characters. This one I've learned more recently, and I'll try to put it into a super simple explanation, especially because this script is getting really long. Now if you're in Masters, Grandmasters, Top 500, none of this video is for you. You've already known what all these terms mean, and you definitely know what this one means. And for anybody in the metal ranks, you might have heard of this term maybe once or twice from a YouTube video or even in the Overwatch League, but I feel like it's more of a lost term, especially in the lower ranks. The ones that people probably remember are the main/off characters. So like on Overwatch 1, you had a main tank, you had an off tank, you had a main heal, you had an off heal. Now those terms are similar, but they're not the same. For example, on DPS, the main DPS is usually like a hit scan character, or another way of thinking about it is typically the top fragger. Now this isn't always the case, but because of the nature of the characters that they play, this is kind of the simplest explanation. Now the flex DPS is usually a projectile character. This can be somebody like Pharah, Junkrat, Torbjorn, Sim. Now I want to make this very clear. This is not a steadfast rule. This isn't something where it's cut and dry. This is how you have to play Overwatch or you're not playing it right. Because even in competitive play in the higher ranks or even in the Overwatch League, there's some times where you have to kind of step outside of these quote unquote rules. For instance, Sojourn's primary fire isn't hit scan, but a railgun is. So a lot of main DPS play her because all you have to do is kind of charge up your railgun, which is pretty easy to do, especially if you're just shooting the tank and then immediately switching over to one of the DPS or the supports. In the support category, main supports are usually someone like Lucio or Brig or Zen, just someone with high utility abilities. For instance, Lucio and his speed boost gives you a lot of advantages. It helps with repositioning faster, it helps with getting in and out of fights faster, getting your teammates out of danger, so then once you get around a corner, you switch to your heal, do the boost for that, and then go back to your speed boost to keep it moving. Or even Brig, like I said before, is usually played like a bouncer for the back line, so that if they have a Genji or they have a Sombra, you're kind of already focusing them, and healing is kind of secondary. You want to make sure your back line is safe, and then boom, go throw some heals, make sure your back line is safe again. Now flex supports are the ones that focus more on healing, where most of their abilities even go around keeping the team alive and keeping them in the fight versus high utility. In this category would include like Ana, Bab, Moira, Kiriko, pretty much all the ones that they can kind of carry most of the healing by themselves, and then the main support can step in every once in a while to give them a hand. Now just like I said before, these are not steadfast rules that have to be followed to a T 24/7. There are going to be times where you might have to play somebody that's considered a flex support, but you're supposed to be the main support. For this example, you're on main support, your flex is already on Bap, who does a lot of healing in general, but the other team has a Doomfist or like a Wrecking Ball who is decimating your team, and their supports are pretty much making sure he can get out of whatever situation he gets himself into. Now depending on who their supports are, Ana might be a good pick as the main support. Like I said before, your flex support is already on BAP, so he can carry a lot of the heals. This way all the Ana has to do is snipe the other team supports and sleep nade the tank, and that changes the entire game. In this scenario, you're still using Ana like a main support because healing is still secondary. And I think people get too hung up on these terms, especially in the lower ranks, where they think that these are the cut and dry steadfast rules, and they're too afraid to step out of that box to help the team. Man, this is probably the most I've talked on this channel since I started this back in high school. If you've made it here to the end, go ahead and subscribe. You obviously enjoyed the video, and it's free. Let me know if I left anything out in the comments below, or just leave a comment of your favorite alt voice line, because engagement. Remember to share this with a friend that uses these terms incorrectly to save them from their own ignorance, or let me know in the comments below if I've just been yapping. Whichever one makes more sense. I've been talking for a while now, so I'm gonna go get some water. Have a nice day.